Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We're going to start with the heat is beginning to build on Joe Biden, talking about this sexual assault charge that a former aide of his made that happened back in 1993. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, but we're going to crank it up a little bit more today. Secondly, should you pay a fear tax? Because believe me, if you're paying people to stay at home while you're working, it is a tax on you, and it is based out of fear. If we don't go back to work here pretty soon, the only thing, as Mr. Roosevelt said, that we have to fear is fear itself. So we're going to talk about that. And then Nancy Pelosi, she's back on the scene again. Of course, she just endorsed Joe Biden. I didn't even know she didn't endorse him until I heard her endorse him. But she's pushing for basically a guaranteed income now. It's time. The time has come to pay you just for breathing. And, of course, the government keeps paying people after they're dead. So, they're very efficient at paying people, I suppose. But we start with Trump allies. This is from a Washington Post article. And I want you to hear the headline here. Just pay attention to this headline. We'll talk more about it in just a moment. Trump allies highlight new claims regarding allegations against Biden. Some allies of President Trump pointed Monday to new claims by a woman who said she was told about sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden decades ago, renewing attention to questions about the past behavior of the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. I love how they say Trump allies, and it's very important that they're saying that, because it's implying that if you're not a Trump ally, there's a non-story here. And of course, we know that's not true. I'm not necessarily saying that Joe Biden is guilty of anything, but in the Me Too era, we've already established now that women are to be believed no matter what. And even Joe Biden has said this, and we're going to play a video for you in just a minute showing you his thoughts, not on the case, of course, because he don't want anybody to talk about that, but on the fact that women should be believed and they should be respected when they make these accusations and come forward and without fear. And I actually agree with that. So it's Trump allies that, when I say, I'm not saying, but let me back up just to be clear. I'm not saying all women should be believed, but I think that it should be investigated, credible accusations. And I do believe that women have a fear of coming forward. And I might expand upon that in just a moment, but it's not just Trump allies. I guess maybe you could count me as that, because I did mention this last week. Apparent corroboration surfaced this week for elements of two accusations made by Biden's former aide, Tara Reade, one involving harassment and the second a sexual assault. So she basically said that Mr. old creepy, smelly, smell the hair Joe there harassed her on more than one occasion, and actually assaulted her, physically groped her on a second occasion. Biden has not commented on the allegations, but his campaign has denied them and pointed to his record on women's rights and the promotion of women in his offices. Well, maybe he's trying to lift them up there. I mean, the fact that he's promoted women's issues is irrelevant to a sexual assault. I mean, many people have praised one thing. I mean, you hear people like take for instance this some of these preachers that come out just totally like screaming at the rooftop about homosexuals. But one thing we found is that if some people are just blasting homosexuals all the time, it turns out that they're the one bending over. I mean, it's crazy. You hear someone all the time chirping. Quite often, they're chirping for a reason. But it says here, I like it to I want to make a point here. At the very beginning of this paragraph, it says apparent corroboration. So there are I think four witnesses, maybe five, depending on how you look at it. Of course, one of them is dead, the lady's mom. But there are four people, I believe, that in some form or fashion have come forward and said that Miss Reed reported this behavior of Joe Biden to them. And some of them are actually women, so they're to be believed. But like they say, apparent corroboration. And apparent, so I decided to look up the word apparent and see if it meant what I was thinking it meant. Because if you tuned into my show any length of time, first of all, if you hadn't, welcome, where you been? Secondly, you're in the right place. But words do absolutely matter. But one of the definitions of apparent is seeming real or true, but not necessarily so. So it may or may not be actually true. So did you ever hear the word apparent used when they had Michael Avenatti on TV 24/7 on CNN and MSNBC for a few months there? I mean, he was literally, think about this, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, Michael Avenatti got famous for being Stormy Daniels' attorney, but he came forward in a big way during the Kavanaugh hearings and had multiple women that supposedly, and it turns out it was all bogus, but he was a rising star. You remember, and the Democrats don't want to remember this, but they literally were touting this dude as a leading contender for 2020 in the presidential primary preference for the Democrats. In fact, just before, he got accused, if you remember, for assaulting a woman himself out in California, Mr. Avenatti. And just before that accusation came out, New Hampshire, which is where the second primary, or the first actual primary is held in the presidential preference primary, he was lined up to be the keynote speaker for the New Hampshire Democratic Party fundraiser. This guy, Michael Avenatti. But do you ever remember CNN saying anything about apparent corroboration? No, it was just matter of fact. Avenatti said it. It's good as gold. You can take it to the bank. Kavanaugh's got to go. I mean, the level or the standard, if you will, for a credible witness doesn't seem to depend on the witness themselves. It simply depends on if they're accusing a Republican or a Democrat. If they're accusing a Republican, they got to be believed, let alone Donald Trump. But if they're accusing a Democrat, not so much. But words do matter. Linda Lacassiere, who's one of the corroborating witnesses, who was one of Reed's neighbors in California, where Reed moved after working for Biden, said in an interview with Business Insider published Monday that Reed told her in the mid-1990s that Biden has put his hand up her skirt and put his fingers inside her. So he was just trying to uplift her, right? Think about this. That right there is more corroboration than anything that was done in the Kavanaugh case. Because if you go back to the Kavanaugh case, you had one person, Blasey Ford, come out and say that Kavanaugh had assaulted her back in high school, right? And as she said she had corroborating people, but they could not produce one. And matter of fact, the ones that she said were could witness to attest to what happened with Kavanaugh said, I don't know what she's talking about. So there were no corroborating witnesses really in the Blasey Ford case against Kavanaugh. And what happened in that case? It went on for weeks. They called for a second FBI investigation, then a third, and the women are to be believed, and men should just sit down and shut up, according to Mazie Hirono. I mean, this thing went to epic proportions, right? No corroborating evidence whatsoever, but it went on and on and on. This particular case is a non-starter for the Democrat Party, for the mainstream media, and there are multiple corroborating witnesses. You tell me there's a double standard, and I'll tell you, like I've been telling you, there is no double standard. There's only one standard, and Republicans, conservatives, and certainly anybody remotely connected to Donald Trump, even Donald Trump supporters, are held to that standard, and the left, they're not held to anything, man. But it just riles me. Lorraine, but it goes on. It's not just this one witness. There are multiple. Lorraine Sanchez, a former colleague of Reed's in the office of California State Senator, also told the news outlet that Reed told her in the mid-90s that she had been sexually harassed by her former boss while she was in D.C., and as a result of her voicing her concerns to her supervisor, she was let go, fired. So now you got a second person, a woman as well, coming forward. And think about coming forward in this environment. They're opening themselves up to all kind of ridicule, correct? It's not like they're going to be welcomed as a hero by the mainstream media, certainly not the Democratic Party. And even people who are all about hashtag Me Too are divided on this issue. I'm just surprised they're actually divided. But a lot of people, including many of the Democratic women that have been so vocal on this issue, and some of them hoping to be Biden's VP choice, are pretty mum on the issue or downplaying it. What does Mazie Hirono have to say about this? I don't hear a word from her, right? But it's, this idea that all women should be believed. Either they should be or they shouldn't be. Now, I think that people should be believed based on the credibility of their story. The sex part of it doesn't really interest me whatsoever. Now, I do know from personal history, as I've told you before, I worked at a drug treatment center for like 15 years, and it was one of the things that amazed me right off the start there was how many women had been sexually abused. It is a frightening total in actuality, and there may be a direct correlation between their drug addiction and being abused, and men too, but women, it was off the chart how many people. I had no idea. I knew women were abused, so don't misunderstand me, but I had no idea that it was the problem it was until I worked at a drug treatment center. So I'm all about women need to be believed to a certain extent, and I do believe it is very difficult for them to come forward. Look what's happening. This woman coming forward now. I mean, just called everything but a child of God. But Joe Biden, now what you wonder what he thinks about all this? Now, he obviously hasn't spoken about this issue, hasn't been asked a question about it, by the way, and this was known by reporters all through the presidential debates, but it never came up once. Not one single time. And Joe hasn't even been asked a question about this. So there's, he hasn't volunteered to answer, but he hasn't been asked a question. But we do know what Biden actually thinks about this, about women should be believed and sexual assault victims and the problems they deal with. And we have it on video. Let's play it right now.
You were chairman of the Judiciary Committee back in 1991. You were roundly criticized for not doing more during that hearing. Looking back on that, specifically, how would you advise senators to proceed next week? And how do you balance the rights of a woman who's making accusations like this versus the presumption that a person is innocent until proven guilty?
Well, I think the presumption should exist, but what should happen is the woman should be given the benefit of the doubt and not be abused again by the system. My biggest regret was I didn't know how I could shut you off as you were a senator and you were attacking Nina Hill's character. Under the Senate rules, I can't gavel you down and say you can't ask that question, although I tried. And so what happened was she got victimized again during the process. And I believed her when she came forward. I encouraged her to come forward. We were in a position where we got the FBI to do an investigation, and I voted against Clarence Thomas. He only got 7 votes. He got 7 yes and 7 no's. It was a tie vote in the committee. But I hope that they understand what courage it takes for someone to come forward and relive what they believe happened to them and let them state it, but treat her with respect. Ask tough questions. Ask substantive questions. Where were you? What said? Who said what? Etc. But don't go after not the character assassination. Well,
it seems like you get it now versus back in '91.
Well, I think I got it in '91. I don't think it. Well, people have their own opinion. That's why I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. The second, and during this period, and the second reason, I insisted the next time out, 2 women come on the committee. 2 women. They didn't want to come on the committee. So I campaigned for Carol Moseley Brown on the condition that if she won, she'd come on the committee. It's important. It's important that people understand, and I think people do now, understand how hard it is to come forward. And I always say to men, they say, why is it so hard? How about if you've been abused? You see the movie Deliverance? How about if you were the guy strapped to the tree? Would you come forward? Would you want to relive that? I'm serious. I'm deadly earnest.
That's a good... First of all, let's give credit to the Today Show. That's where that video came from. But Biden at the end there compares men coming forward from Deliverance. If you don't know about that movie, there's one some you could stream right there. Ned Beatty squealing like a pig. But Biden says that women should be believed. They should be given credibility. That should be investigated. They should be treated with reverence and all of that. And I take him at his word on that. But it turns out that if a woman accuses him, and keep in mind, this is the second woman that we know that has accused Biden. This is not the first. There was that lady who was a member of the legislature, I do believe, in Nevada, that came out at the beginning of last year and said that Joe Biden was aggressive on her, sniffing her and caressing her and coming up from her on her backside and everything else. And nothing really happened there either. And she was intimidated by Biden. She literally admitted that she didn't want to hurt his chances. And even some of these witnesses in the Tara Reade case, one woman said that she believed Tara Reade and she's still going to vote for Biden. That shows you how sick it can get out there. But Biden himself is telling you that women should be believed in credibility. But maybe against him, not so much. In recent days, now here's one. This is the lady, Tara Reade's mom. And we're not going to play the video. I'm sure you've probably seen it by now, but if you hadn't, let me know and we will play it in the future. In recent days, in a 1993, which is the time frame when this happened, a call into Larry King's CNN talk show also surfaced. In it, a woman that Reade identified as her now deceased mother, and pretty much people have corroborated this, that it is true. And guess what? CNN has pulled this video from their archives. That tells you all you need to know right there, doesn't it? Why would CNN pull this specific Larry King episode from their archives? It's because they don't want to hurt Joe Biden, and they know it's true, man. Called to report unspecified problems her daughter was having with her employer, and she called a prominent senator. She did not name Joe Biden, but most people that have researched this believe that it was Tara Reade's mother, and she was, in fact, talking about Joe Biden. Now here, ladies and gentlemen, if this were any Republican, let alone the President of the United States, Donald Trump, what would be happening right now? What would be happening? Let me ask you snowflakes out there. You supporters of Joe Biden, Bernie bros who are thinking about making up their mind yet, if you're not 100% for Donald Trump, let me just ask you, be honest with yourself. If this same type of accusation were happening to Donald Trump right now, what would be happening? I mean, coronavirus would be pushed aside. It would be like there would be hearings, there would be everything else. It would be nonstop against Donald Trump. Why is it at least being talked about? Not one question, I remind you, in the debates came up about this issue, and the reporters already knew it. And you know the answer to the question I'm asking you. What would be happening? It would be hell to pay. There is no question about it. Biden has done several interviews since the assault allegations emerged, but has yet to be asked about them. Think about that. Has yet to be asked about them. It has, however, been a topic for other top Democrats, including some of his potential running mates. But, and that's my issue really with this, that the fact that he's not being asked a question. Let me just give you an example of how crazy it gets. I don't know if you saw the Trump coronavirus update press conference yesterday. There was a question asked by a lady. I did not recognize her, but she literally started out the question like this. She said, she said basically, Mr. President or Mr. Trump, she said, if the coronavirus kills more people than the Vietnam War did in one single year. In other words, Corona kills more in a year than Vietnam did in the whole time it was going on. Does that president deserve to be reelected? I mean, what a question. I mean, these are the types of questions Trump is being asked, and he answered it pretty good. But Biden has not been asked anything remotely like that. Can you imagine, and I know I'm repeating myself, but if I say it, it bears repeating. If this accusation was made against Trump with corroborating witnesses, it would be the only question asked over and over and over and over again. And that's my issue, that's not being asked. But apparently it was asked to a few women who are potential VP picks, and their answers are pretty interesting. Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from Minnesota, said on MSNBC, pointing to her own work to make it easier to bring such cases forward. So they'll talk about how they're for women's issues. She said, this is what Klobuchar said: I think this case has been investigated. I know the vice president as a major leader in domestic abuse. I worked with him on that. Really? That's your answer? You know that this has been investigated. By whom? Could you cite who it's been investigated by? Far as I know, and this woman has filed a police report on this, but as far as I know, there's been no calls from senators like her to investigate this. I haven't heard it. If you have, let me know. Because chime in on whatever Facebook page you're listening to and let me know. Of course, I'll respond to you as quickly as possible. But she says that the vice president is a major leader on domestic abuse. So what? That doesn't mean anything. I mean, the fact that he has worked for women's issues maybe just gives him more opportunity to get in close contact with women. I mean, even Biden had to come out and admit that his behavior with women and other people is inappropriate. Remember, he even had to make an apology for that. But here's Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmire. She's going to chime in on this, who has said she was sexually assaulted herself while in college, was asked on NPR if she was concerned about the allegations. Listen to her response. She said, well, I think women should be able to tell their stories. I think that it's important that these allegations be vetted. Who's vetting them? If they're not being vetted on shows like this and maybe other allies of Trump, who, let me ask you this, Miss Whitmer. Is there anybody who is anti-Trump, which is basically the entire mainstream media? Are they investigating this? They ask no questions of it. But she says, I think it's important that these allegations be vetted from the media to beyond. Well, who's doing it? I don't hear anybody doing it. And I think this is Whitmer again, I think it is something that no one takes lightly, but it is also something that is, personal. So it's personal. Of course it's personal, especially to the woman that's been attacked. And it's so hard to give you greater insight than that, not knowing more about the situation. So let me ask, Ms. Whitmer, are you saying that we need to know more about what happened with Joe Biden and this woman, if it happened at all? Are you saying we need to know more? Because if so, I'm in 100% agreement with you. But don't hold your breath about this. I mean, we need to know more, but we're not going to get it from CNN, MSNBC. I don't expect Morning Joe to make this a big topic, do you? If anything, they'll laugh it off. They will laugh it off. And if you're a woman out there who believes in the Me Too movement, or a man for that matter, let me ask you this. What are you going to do about it? Are you really, if you were all upset about the Kavanaugh situation, are you really just going to let this slide like it's no big deal? Are you really going to do that? Because if you are, then you have no credibility whatsoever. And I'm not saying Joe Biden is guilty of this. He may be innocent. But if you're going to if the standard is a woman coming forward should be believed, or at least given some respect for it and be investigated, if that's the standard, then what makes this any different? I just ask you out there. I'd like to hear what your explanation is for that. All right, we're going to move along here now. We're going to talk about a New York Times article, and this is about restarting the economy. You know that a lot of states are on the verge. I know Florida is talking about some type of reopening by Friday. They haven't officially done it. Multiple states, Georgia has reopened quite a bit of that stuff. So we're going to talk about that. And I really believe that we need to ask ourselves, are we ready for a fear tax? Because it apparently that is what's coming. There are going to be people as the states open up that are, obviously if you don't have a job and you can't get one, that's an issue. But the issue they're talking about in this article is if your job is available, will you take it back? And should you? And if you fear for your safety, should you not? That's what this is all about. So this is from the New York Times. Job or health, restarting the economy threatens to worsen economic inequality. That's, liberals, inequality is everything, right? We'll talk more about that. Efforts to quickly restart economic activity risk further dividing Americans into two major groups along socioeconomic, and they're going to talk about race lines as well. One has the power to control its exposure. They're talking about rich white folks, basically, is what they're saying. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Exposure to coronavirus outbreak, and the other that is forced to choose between potential sickness or financial devastation. So, and this is what amazes me in this article as it unfolds. They're essentially saying that rich white folks, can work from home and keep themselves safe from coronavirus, while if you're a person of color, you're forced to go back to work and you're going to die. That's basically what they're saying. But I thought about this inequality. So inequality is a lack of equality, right? So what is the definition for equality? The state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. So that sounds like something to certainly strive for. Let me let you in on a little secret. Now, and this, if you're snowflakes, you're worried about being melted. First of all, if I melt, you deserve to be melted. But I'll give you a second to kind of put something over your ears or walk out. Equality, this right here. The state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. It sounds great, but it has never, ever existed in humanity. Never. I hate to tell you that, I hate to break you to you, but we have never been equal, ever. And every race has been exposed, some more than others, obviously, to inequalities. I mean, you talk about white folks. Were not white folks like pounded in the ground by Italians? Rome took over basically the known world in Europe, did they not? They were pretty harsh to the Celts, which are about the whitest folks on the planet. And then the Vikings, of course, who are like the Nordic gods, basically, they killed everybody. It didn't matter who you were. I mean, it is never, and I'm not saying we shouldn't strive for equality, but the idea that, God may have created us all equal, but we as human beings have never been able to live up to that. Should we? Absolutely. In reality, it never has happened. It's a pick your poison fact of the crisis. The pandemic recession has knocked millions of the most economically vulnerable Americans out of work. Rushing to reopen, their employers could offer them a financial lifeline, but a potentially steep cost to their health. Rushing to reopen. First of all, are we rushing to reopen? I don't see any rush to reopen. And think about this. If we open up, I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone about this morning before I started the show. If we open up tomorrow, say for instance, let's just name something like movie theaters, which is a big debate about opening them. If every movie theater opened up in your state, do you really believe that there's going to be a bum rush of people lining up to watch the movie? Do you really believe that? I don't. I think people are going to be leery to go into movie theaters. I think movie theaters are going to struggle. I could be wrong, but I think restaurants, so let's assume that restaurants open up and they have all of this protection, social distance, everything else. You go in a restaurant, one person sneezes and everybody's going to stampede the door. People are pretty scared right now. So I say all that to say this. They're not going to rush to open up the economy. Even if everything is lifted, people are going to make their own choices and assess their own risk. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is that your risk has to tell me how to live. Your assessment of your risk dictates how I live. That I got a problem with, but not your assessment of your own risk. I got no issue with that, but don't imprison me because you're scared. I just don't see it that way. State and federal officials have nowhere near the testing capacity. This is a very important capacity that experts say is needed to track and limit the spread of the virus. Did you see where President Trump's administration has come out saying their goal is to test like 20 million people a day? That's pie in the sky, let me just tell you. But I want to get more into testing in a second. But the states are already reopening, urged by President Trump, who is eager to restart the United States economy. Let me just tell you, how long should we actually wait? Even President Trump got on the governor of Georgia for opening too fast. But how long should we wait? Till they get a vaccine? Well, let me tell you, and I could be wrong about this, but my research shows me that when it comes to COVID, and this is what, COVID-19, that there is not actually a vaccine for any of the COVID viruses. So there's no guarantee that we're going to have a vaccine for COVID-19. We don't really have a total vaccine for the flu. We have what is our best guess every year. And still, tens of thousands of people catch the flu that have flu shots. So there's no guarantee. And secondly, I should say, that even if we can develop a COVID-19 vaccine, it could be at least 2 years before it's practically in the market. So should we sit on the sidelines and wait for 15, 18 months, 2 more months? What is the number? There's research coming out right now that hundreds of thousands of people in LA have been infected that they didn't even know about. And there's some research coming out that as many as 15 to 20% of people in New York City have already come in contact with the virus. I mean, this is not just my thoughts. They're out there. You can Google them, but Google is of the devil. I hadn't said that in a while. Just remember. But this testing, let's get into this testing for a minute. And I'm not opposed to testing. And I do think testing is an important part of the process. But the overall, that it's some kind of panacea testing is a lie. It's just not true. I mean, first of all, there's no way we can test 300 million people in any close time frame. And think about this. And this is only logical. If you're tested one day, you could literally be infected walking back to your car at the place you were tested. It's just a lie to think that's the solution. The best part of testing is that people who are actually that have the virus could then be isolated or treated and maybe prevent them from. But testing as to open up the economy, it's just not practical. It'd be great if we could just blanket test everybody. But you could be tested walking into a restaurant thing. But it is not the beginning and end all. It is a part of the process. So if we wait till we can test everybody on a daily basis in the United States of America, well, we'll all be dead of something else before that actually happens. That push is talking about testing is likely to exacerbate long-standing inequalities with workers who are college educated, relatively affluent, and primarily able to continue working from home and minimizing outdoor excursions to reduce the risk of contracting the virus. Let me just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, they're trying to make this a socioeconomic issue. I hate to break this to you, but poverty sucks. Poverty absolutely sucks. It has always sucked. There's never been a time in our nation, let alone world history, when being poor was a good thing. It just sucks. And you're always going to be behind the curve of whatever if you're poor. And the best way to stay poor is to not work and be reliant on the government. It's just crazy, man, that with some idea that we can all be equal. There's no way we could be equally wealthy. There is a way we could be equally poor, and that is if the economy totally collapsed. Because this idea that people can stay in some kind of ivory tower or on some kind of isolated lifestyles of the rich and famous is ludicrous. Yes, being wealthy gives you other opportunities. There's no question. Just like poverty sucks. Being wealthy has been pretty decent for forever. It's just, these are facts. I hate to tell you this, break it to you, but if people are wealthy, if the economy goes in the tank, guess what's going to happen to those wealthy people? Eventually, they're going to go from Wall Street to, on the street. They're going to be going from the White House to the outhouse. I mean, it's very difficult to adjust downward. It's easy to adjust upward. That's kind of one of the things. If you don't get anything else to show, understand it's easy to adjust upwards. But this idea that the wealthy are going to be able to escape anything long term, they're only wealthy when the economy works. Eventually, chickens come home to roost. Those who are lower paid, less educated, and employed in jobs where networking is not an option would face a bleak choice if states lift restrictive orders and employees order them back to work. This is their choice, according to this article. Expose themselves to the pandemic or lose their jobs. So if I'm a business owner and I'm opening up and I can call my employees back to work and half of them say no, should I just say, well, I can respect their choice, but should I just say, well, I'm not going to fill your job until you're ready? No. If my capacity begins to go up, I got to hire more people. And if you're not one of them, that's your choice. It's always been like that. And the virus ain't going to change that. The disempowered group, it said that disempowered group is heavily black and Latino, though it includes lower income white workers as well. So, this idea, they talk about white folks can work from home. Very few people can work from home. It's just not practical. It's no way. I mean, if you're in any kind of manufacturing, how do you work from home? If you're in the entertainment business, how do you be a Disney employee and work from home? It's not possible. So this idea that there's this huge group and they're insinuating white folks that have the advantage of being able to work from home is absolutely ridiculous. It just is. On Friday, Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia allowed gyms, nail and hair salons, and bowling alleys to begin operating, with restaurants and movie theaters allowed to open on Monday. And Colorado, Minnesota, it talks about the states. I guess so. All of these businesses that they're talking about, restaurants, bowling alleys, hair salons, barbershops, nails, massage parlor, they're all run by black folks and Latinos. I mean, give me a break. There's people of every creed and color in every one of these businesses. So it's just ridiculous what they're saying here. Let me check my time. I'm doing pretty good. Not all businesses will decide to reopen even if they are allowed to. That is true, because if you're not going to make a profit opening up your business, it's a real struggle. I give you a quick example. I go on these fishing trips all the time. We've been shut down. That's why I'm making fishing great again. That's why I'm the fish whisperer. This is Billy Bob Bass, by the way, if you're new to the show. He doesn't say much to the show, but we're psychically connected. He has a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But he keeps me connected on this. But I go on these trips. We've been shut down for a couple of months now. They're thinking about trying to reopen them, and they're trying to figure out the basic equation for doing this. And it is a tough thing. And they may decide not to reopen, because you can't just reopen a business. You maybe break even for a while, but you dadgum sure can't open a business if you're going to lose money. As the old captain I grew up hanging out with, Mr. Wilson Hubbard, he's quite the character, God rest his soul. But he had a saying, and I was telling this to one of his grandsons yesterday. One of his sayings was, you can't go broke making a profit. and man, is that true. So these businesses have a heck of a decision to make. Do they open up hoping for business to come in? Because I think people are going to be leery to go to any of these businesses, even if they reopen. But it said not all businesses will decide to reopen, even if they're allowed to. Many will choose to stay closed, fearing too many customers to make it worth the cost. So, and it says here that employees recall them to their jobs, talking about if they open, would in most circumstances lose their unemployment benefits if they took the job back. That's a big deal. If people are paid more to stay at home, many people fear they will. even if their pay might not return to levels they were earning before the crisis. So let me ask you, is there another choice? Some people seem to think so. Is there going to be a fear tax? I mentioned that at the top of this article. A fear tax to me is that if I go to work and you choose to stay at home, I'm going to be taxed for your choice because it costs money to feed you. We're not going to let people just starve on the streets. We don't do that now, contrary to what the mainstream media have you believe. But we're going to feed people. We're going to take care of people. That's what Americans do. But so I'm going to have to go. I'm going to make the choice to go back to work for my family. But you're going to choose to stay home. I'm going to be taxed for your fear. I got an issue with that. I just do. You can judge your own risk. I have no issue with that. But don't tax me behind it. And here's something I am sick and tired of hearing. I'm sick and tired of hearing the word essential workers or essential jobs. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not downplaying the health risk to our health care professionals, our police officers, first responders, military, all that. That's not what I'm saying. But what pisses me off about the term essential workers is that every job is essential to the person that has it. If your job, it doesn't matter what it is, if your job provides for your family so that they can eat and have some of the luxuries in life, shelter and everything else, then that job is absolutely essential to you and your family, right? So what more essential could you be than the provider for your kids? I mean, every job is essential, some more than others, but this idea that there are non-essential jobs is BS, flat and simple. Rashad Robinson, the president of and how we get in this racial question, Justice Advocacy Group of Color Change, said Georgia's governor has targeted a whole set of businesses where black people both work and patronize. For those workers and customers, he said, it's an absolute death sentence. Well, let me tell you, Mr. Robinson, you're totally full of crap. Black people may be dying at a higher rate of this, and we're finding out now that the death rate, period, is much lower than what we've been led to believe. But if black people, this is not about race, or there's some racial parts of the virus, it could be. There are different types of things affect different races of people differently. I'm not disputing that. But the bottom line reason why black people are dying, if they are at a higher rate, we're being told is because of what they call the comorbidity. In other words, they have more asthma, heart disease, overweight, that kind of stuff. That's something we could change. But he goes on to say the inequality we are seeing isn't unfortunate like a car accident. It's unjust. It's being manufactured through a whole set of choices. So what he's saying is essentially everything is racist. So the governor open up businesses is racist. He didn't, do you really believe that the governor of Georgia, you can hate him all you want, but do you honestly believe that the governor of Georgia is sitting there going, well, if I open up these businesses, more black folks and Latinos will die. That's part of my plan. I mean, I'm sure there are some of you that actually believe that. But if you're sane, do you really believe that? I mean, come on. So opening businesses is racist. Name me one business that wants to shut down. Is there a business out there that's going, my goal is to shut down? I don't think any business is racist when it comes to that. There may be racist people. You can't legislate what's in a man's heart. But I don't think there's a single business that going, man, I sure hope they don't open me back up. It's just crazy, man. And I guess Corona's racist. Let me check my time. I only got a couple minutes left. We're probably not going to get on to, let's do it very, very quickly. Let's move all the way down the line here to this Breitbart article about Nancy Pelosi. A minimum guaranteed income may be worthy of our attention, Pelosi says, as Congress weighs another relief package amid the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, which has many small businesses closed until stay-at-home orders are lifted. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi floated out the possibility of a minimum guaranteed income for workers. In other words, you're going to be paid to stay home. Now, not everybody would choose the minimum amount, be paid to stay home. We need to watch this, ladies and gentlemen. because these types of things that the Democrats are pushing, the mail-in voting, we've talked a lot about that. We'll get back to that as more news comes out. But this idea of an income guaranteed to people is going to disincentivize people to go to work. We got to get back to work, or our economy is going in the tank, and more people will die from that than coronavirus, period. There's no question about it. Well, I got one more thing. I think I got a minute left here. Government dependence makes, what government wants to do is make poverty comfortable. If you look at what the Democrats have been doing for the decades, they try to make poverty as comfortable as it can be. Poverty is supposed to suck. But let me just ask you this question. Michael Jordan is really popular again right now because of this series that's being on ESPN. What separates Michael Jordan from other great athletes? It's his absolute desire, 100% desire to win. That's what makes, he's got great talent, but what separates him is his desire to win. There's opportunities out there right now in this reopening of the economy, and they're going to be millionaires made of all races, creed, and colors that never thought they would because of opportunities that we don't even know about. You have to assess your own risk, no question about it, but we need to get back to work no matter what. I don't think it matters what our creed or color is. It just matters where we care about ourselves, our family, and the American dream, which is still alive. But if we don't go to work, it's going to be dead. Hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. Our YouTube channel's out there, John Martin Talks, of course, America's Voice News. There's multiple ways to look at us there. Check that out. Go to their page. A lot of you are listening. Look at the top of their page, and you'll see all the areas where they're broadcast. We're broadcast too. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.